In the black silence of eternity, where even the stars forget to breathe, a single man stood, bald, unarmored, unburdened by faith. Around him, the galaxy burned with the roar of dying gods and the madness of unending war. And somewhere, amidst that storm, the emperor dreamed, not of conquest, but of absolution. Two beings of impossible power, one forged by despair and divinity, the other born of boredom and absurd simplicity. Yet in that collision, between faith and emptiness, between God and man, the Imperium itself would tremble. Before we descend further into this forgotten faith, remember to join us so that our stories may never fade into silence. The wind that moved through the ruins of Terra carried no warmth, only the scent of rust and incense. The sky above the cradle of mankind was not sky at all, but a pallid dome of smoke and ash, layered from millennia of worship and war. Beneath that unholy firmament, pilgrims knelt in endless rows, whispering litanies to a god who had not spoken in 10,000 years. And then, without ceremony or omen, a man appeared. No warp flare, no drop-ship descent, no shattering of the air, just a quiet displacement of dust, a presence where there should have been none. He stood there, his head bare, his eyes tired, his cape torn and colorless from forgotten battles. He looked not like a demigod, nor a soldier, but a man late for something unimportant. A child saw him first, a girl with soot on her cheeks and devotion in her eyes. She tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered that a saint had come. The mother bowed instinctively, for all strange things in the Imperium were either divine or dangerous. The man rubbed his bald head and squinted at the endless spires of Terra. "Huh," he murmured, voice lost to the wind. "This place looks like it needs cleaning." To the child, the words were sacred. To the city, they were heresy. Within minutes, the VoxNet crackled across 1,000 precincts of the Adeptus Arbitus. Machine priests translated his appearance into code and creed. No record matched, no genetic tag registered. Even the Mechanicus hololytic scans returned only silence, anomaly, unknown, possible Xenos mimic. Yet the Emperor's turret twitched that night. The psychers screamed in their sleep, and the air itself thickened with questions that had no right to exist. He wandered through the avenues of the pilgrims, past marble statues blackened by centuries of prayer. People watched from shadows, their faith colliding with fear. Here, faith was not belief, it was survival. Every breath was a liturgy, every doubt a sin punishable by flame.
But the man, Saitama, though none here could know his name, had no faith left to lose. He watched a group of men kneel before a mural of the emperor, their foreheads bleeding from repeated prostration. He watched the incense rise like ghosts around them, carrying the faint scent of old despair. He tilted his head. "You guys okay?" he asked softly. They froze. A priest turned, robes of crimson and gold, face half machine, half flesh. His vox grill buzzed like a dying fly. "Blasphemer!" the priest hissed. "Silence your tongue before it defiles the air of his world!" Saitama blinked. "Huh? I was just asking." But the priest had already drawn his staff, a relic tipped with crackling promethium fire. The onlookers gasped as the flames roared to life, the shape of the imperial aquila glowing in the smoke. "No man may question the pain of devotion," the priest shouted. "Not here, not ever." Saitama sighed. "Man, everyone's so touchy lately." The priest struck, a column of fire lancing toward the stranger. The heat scorched the air, melting stone and steel alike. But when the smoke cleared, the man still stood, unharmed, brushing soot from his shoulder. The silence that followed was heavier than prayer. He looked at the priest, not angry, not amused, just faintly inconvenienced. Then he reached out and flicked. It was a lazy, almost bored gesture, and the staff shattered. The flames winked out. The priest was thrown backward through 3 layers of wall, landing amid relics that had survived cataclysms. Until now. Gasps, screams, the pilgrims scattered like dust before the wind. Saitama looked around, confused. Did I overdo it?
High above, servo skulls recorded everything. Within moments, the footage reached the command nodes of the Adeptus Custodes. Golden sentinels, silent as the statues they resembled, turned their masked faces toward the screen. The figure was small, unimpressive, and yet he had undone sacred flame with a gesture. "He stands upon the holy world," one custodian said, voice filtered through ancient gold. "Unbidden, unbowed. This cannot stand." Another lowered his spear. "The Emperor's peace is disturbed." They moved. Across the sky of Terra, thunder rolled, not from storm, but from descent. Custodes, the Emperor's own, fell from orbit, trailing gold fire and wrath. And somewhere amid the chaos, the bald man looked up, squinting at the falling lights. "Guess someone noticed," he said, scratching his cheek. As the Custodes descended, the city held its breath. Every pilgrim, every cleric, every servo-priest paused mid-chant, for none dared to imagine what it meant for golden warriors to draw their blades on the cradle of man. Saitama stood alone in the plaza, cloak stirring faintly. Around him, the icons of 10 millennia glowed faintly under the dim sun. The Custodes landed like thunder made flesh. Golden armor, eternal faces, spears brighter than dawn. They surrounded him in a circle, formation precise and sacred. Their leader stepped forward. His voice was the sound of command carved in stone. "Kneel!" Saitama blinked. Why? To stand before the Emperor's chosen is to stand before the will of Terra itself. Oh, sounds tiring.
A flicker of disbelief passed through the squad, just a heartbeat of hesitation, enough for doubt to bloom. The leader raised his guardian spear. "Then you shall learn humility in death." Saitama's shoulders slumped. "Man, I just got here." The first strike came, a blur of motion and sanctified precision. A blade of golden light cut through the air, fast enough to split atoms. The ground erupted. Pilgrims screamed and fled as the plaza detonated in a shock wave of divine violence. When the smoke cleared, he was still standing, one hand up, fingers closed lightly around the blade. "Nice sword," he said, looking at it curiously. The custodian tried to pull back, could not. The weapon, forged from the Emperor's own design, trembled like glass. Then it shattered. Saitama exhaled slowly. "You guys really need to chill." And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Custodes felt something close to fear. The Vox channels erupted with prayers and warnings. "Anathema on Terra, unauthorized presence within the sanctum precincts." Yet above it all, Saitama only sighed. The sun, dim and poisoned, caught the edge of his cape and turned it gold. He looked toward the distant towers of the imperial palace. I guess I should meet this emperor guy if he's the one in charge. He began walking, slow, unhurried, unstoppable. Behind him, the custodes regrouped. Before him, the gates of the throne awaited. And somewhere, deep within the golden throne, something stirred. A thought, a whisper, a memory of humanity before it forgot how to dream.
The march to the throne was unlike any the custodes had ever witnessed. The stranger moved as though gravity itself had forgotten him, his steps almost casual, each one echoing through the stone like the heartbeat of something vast and indifferent. Around him, the walls of Terra whispered prayers. Ancient vox chorals trembled in the static, unsure whether to praise or condemn the presence that walked among them. In the distance, the imperial palace loomed, not a structure, but a continent of faith made metal. Every tower was a sermon, every wall a wound carved by centuries of worship. Billions had died to build it, billions more prayed to it. It was the last monument of man's devotion and despair. And he approached it like one might approach a grocery store. "Hope they've got decent food in there," Saitama muttered, scratching his stomach. The sound echoed in the ruined corridors like blasphemy. Behind him, custodes followed, 20 golden giants, their faces obscured by helmets carved in the image of forgotten heroes. Their boots struck the marble with sacred rhythm, a sound that once heralded salvation. Now it sounded like judgment chasing futility. "Identify yourself," one demanded again. "By what right do you tread upon the sanctum of mankind's God?" He shrugged. "Didn't know I needed a right. I just walked here." "Then you walk into damnation." The custodes raised their weapons in unison. The hum of their power fields filled the air like the murmur of angry angels. And for a moment, just a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Then Saitama sighed. "Man, you guys really don't take no for an answer." The explosion that followed was silent. No fire, no thunder, only pressure. Invisible force expanded outward, turning air into a wall of destruction. The custodes were thrown backward, crashing through walls of marble older than nations. Statues cracked, relics shattered. The air filled with the sound like the breaking of faith itself. When the dust settled, he was alone again. He didn't look triumphant, just tired. He stared up at the massive doors before him, the gates of eternity. Their surface was carved with 10,000 years of history, from the Great Crusade to the heresy to the age of decay that followed. Scenes of glory and pain, of gods and monsters, of mankind's desperate will to believe in something greater than itself. He placed a hand upon the cold metal. It thrummed faintly beneath his touch, as though the entire world was a heartbeat away from collapse. Inside, he could feel it, a presence, ancient and immense, burning with both agony and purpose. The Emperor, the golden lord of mankind. And beneath that light, faint but certain, something else. A shadow of thought, curious and weary. He pushed. The doors groaned, then parted. The chamber beyond was not a throne room, but a tomb. The air was thick with the scent of oil, incense, and decay. Hundreds of servitors lined the walls, their flesh fused to machines that hummed eternal prayers. Rivers of cables ran across the floor like veins of a dying god. At the center, upon a throne of gold and agony, sat the Emperor. His body was a ruin of miracles, flesh and metal intertwined, bound by psychic fire that neither life nor death could claim. His face was unmoving, eyes closed, the light of the Astronomicon pulsing faintly through his veins. Around him, the silence of 10,000 years hung heavy. Not peace, but exhaustion. Saitama stood there, watching. "So, this is the guy, huh?" he murmured. The air trembled, not from voice, but from thought. "Who are you?" The words were not spoken. They arrived, directly into his mind, vast and absolute. The weight of them nearly bent reality. He blinked. "Just a hero for fun, I guess."
A hero. The psychic voice rippled, half amusement, half sorrow. "There are no heroes here, only the ashes of what they were." "Yeah," Saitama said, glancing at the endless machinery. "Kinda looks that way." For the first time in 10 millennia, something stirred behind the Emperor's lifeless eyes. Curiosity. This man had entered the throne unharmed, unafraid, untouched by the madness of the warp. No psychic signature, no soul distortion. He was empty. And yet, that emptiness was not void. It was purity, a stillness the Emperor had never known. "You are not human." Saitama tilted his head. "I mean, I am, just not a very interesting one." "That is impossible. No human walks without fear, without purpose, without faith." He shrugged. "Guess I'm the first, then." The light from the golden throne flickered. The custos outside, gathering their strength, froze as a psychic tremor spread across the palace. Not rage, not warning, but something alien. Interest. "You stand in the presence of the divine, and you feel nothing." Saitama nodded slowly. "Pretty much." "Why?" He looked up at the withered god, and for a moment his simple eyes met eternity. "Because," he said softly, "I already beat everything there was to beat. After that, nothing really feels fun anymore." The Emperor said nothing, but across the warp, something shifted. A ripple through the sea of souls. Billions of psychers shuddered in unison as the throne's golden light dimmed, then steadied.
In that moment, the Emperor, master of mankind, architect of humanity's fate, felt something he had not felt since before the heresy. Envy. And deep within the decaying machinery, the divine machine whispered a single thought, a question older than empire or war. Was this man freedom, or the end of meaning itself? The throne flickered again, casting shadows across the chamber. Outside, the custodes hesitated, uncertain whether to storm the room or fall to their knees. Inside, two beings faced each other, one bound to the weight of eternity, the other too light to be bound by anything at all. And for the first time, the silence between God and man was not filled with prayer, but possibility. The Emperor's voice echoed, quieter now, almost human. "Then let us speak, hero. Let us see what remains worth saving." Saitama crossed his arms. "Sure, but do you have any snacks?" The Emperor did not answer, but the golden light flickered once more, and for a fleeting instant it almost looked like he smiled. The Astronomicon pulsed, Terra trembled, the galaxy shifted its breath. The conversation had begun. The news spread through Terra like wildfire, sanctified in fear. The unrecorded one had spoken with the Emperor. Pilgrims wept in the streets, unsure whether to rejoice or flee. Ecclesiarchs tore pages from holy texts in despair, claiming prophecy had been fulfilled or broken. The Mechanicus sent waves of servitors into the palace to analyze the anomaly, but none returned. Even the psychers who gazed into the Astronomicon reported seeing something impossible. The light of the Emperor, flickering, like laughter hidden within divine flame. The custodes did not speak of what they saw. They sealed the gates, their golden armor reflecting both glory and unease. For the first time since the siege, they did not know whether to defend their god or protect him from what had entered his chamber. Inside, Saitama stood before the emperor's throne, still and small beneath the mountain of gold and machinery. He was not awed, nor frightened, nor reverent. He simply waited, arms crossed, as the endless hum of the life-sustaining engines filled the void between them. It was not silence. It was the sound of eternity decaying. The emperor's voice came again, not his command, but as thought woven with grief. You carry nothing. No gene mark, no warp trace, no scar of belief. You exist outside the design of all things. Saitama scratched the back of his head. Yeah, I get that a lot. And yet you endure. Even here, where souls are burnt into fuel, you stand unaffected. He shrugged. I'm kinda used to it. Most stuff doesn't really matter anymore. There was a long pause, filled only by the electric whisper of the throne. Such apathy is death. Maybe, Saitama replied, but I don't really die either. The emperor's gaze, unseen but all-encompassing, pierced him. Then you are a mirror. A what now? A reflection of humanity without purpose.
Saitama looked around at the decaying throne room, the dead servitors, the endless machines. You sure that's my problem? If the Emperor could have laughed, it would have been then. Instead, the chamber shuddered with a psychic resonance that felt like bitter amusement. You speak like one who has never known despair. Yet despair is the core of humanity. Yeah, I guess I skipped that part. Outside, the custodes listened through encrypted vox channels, their minds torn between duty and awe. Some whispered that the stranger was a daemon sent to tempt the emperor. Others, quieter and afraid, wondered if he was something else, something the emperor himself had once wished humanity could become. One of them, Captain Lysander, ancient even among his kind, finally spoke through the comm. Could he be testing us? No one answered. Meanwhile, within the throne, the emperor's psychic form stirred in the immaterium. The warp itself quivered like a beast sensing prey, for the presence before him had no echo in the sea of souls. No pattern, no weakness, just silence. A void so complete that even daemons hesitated to touch it. Tell me, hero, the emperor's voice resounded, what is your faith? Saitama blinked. Faith? Yes, that which gives you strength, that which binds your existence. He thought for a moment, eyes unfocused. I guess I don't have one. I just help people when I can. Not really a big deal. Then you help without reward? Without glory? Without purpose? Yeah, he said. I mean, if someone's in trouble, you just help them, right? Doesn't need to be complicated. The throne crackled, systems flaring, energy coursing like divine heartbeat. The emperor's psychic presence wavered between rage and revelation. You speak of simplicity as if it is salvation. Saitama looked at him. Maybe it is. For a long moment, the emperor said nothing. In that silence, the warp itself recoiled, the very laws of divinity bending under something purer than belief. Then the golden light around the throne dimmed as if a vast sigh moved through the room. There was a time, the emperor whispered, When I dreamed of such simplicity, when mankind needed no faith, no gods, no war, only reason, only peace. He paused, and the words that followed felt like a confession long delayed. But they needed me. They made me God, and now I am a prisoner of their need. Saitama tilted his head. So, you got stuck being the boss? The Emperor's light flickered. Yes, and every day I die a little more because of it. Saitama looked down, quiet for once. The weight of the words pressed against him, not as fear, but as understanding. For though their worlds were different, their loneliness was the same. Both had reached the peak of strength. Both had lost the reason to climb. The Emperor's gaze softened, like a dying sun. Tell me, Saitama, does your power bring you joy? He hesitated. Not really. And yet, you still fight. Why?
Saitama's eyes drifted toward the fractured ceiling, where the dim glow of Terra's polluted sky leaked through. Because someone's gotta. Even when it means nothing. Especially then. And for the first time, the Emperor's presence felt smaller. Not weak, but human. A faint echo of the man he once was, long before the throne, before the worship, before the empire that demanded his divinity. Then you understand? Guess so. A distant alarm wailed. The custodes preparing breach formation. The moment was breaking. Saitama turned toward the massive doors. Guess they're getting antsy. They fear what they cannot name. Yeah, people usually do. He started walking away, footsteps soft on the golden floor. Behind him, the Emperor's voice lingered in the silence, faint, almost mournful. If you leave, they will try to kill you again. Saitama smiled faintly. That's fine. And if you destroy them? He paused at the doorway. Then I'd just be another monster, wouldn't I? He stepped through, disappearing into the haze of incense and smoke. The Emperor watched him go. The golden light flickered again, not dimmer, but warmer, as if a single human heartbeat had echoed in the heart of God. Across the palace, the custodes prepared for war, and yet none of them could shake the feeling that the Emperor, their eternal master, was no longer watching them. He was watching the man who had reminded him what it meant to be free. The bells of Terra began to toll. Not the joyous chime of victory, nor the rhythmic call to prayer, but the low, drawn-out knell reserved for heresy so vast that even the ecclesiarchy trembled to name it. From the highest cathedra to the deepest manufactorum, the word spread, a god has been challenged. Within the corridors of the imperial palace, golden shadows moved with mechanical grace. Custodes, 1,000 strong, assembled beneath the banners of the Emperor's will. The air thrummed with devotion and dread. Vox prayers overlapped in static, each one pleading for permission to strike, to cleanse the blasphemy that had walked unharmed into the presence of their God. But the command never came. The Emperor was silent, and that silence was worse than any order. Captain Lysander stood at the forefront, helm beneath one arm, eyes like polished iron. If he does not speak, we must act in faith. Faith, that fragile, dangerous word. Another custodian, younger, spoke with unease. Faith is for mortals. We act by duty. Then call it duty, Lysander replied. But if this being desecrates the throne, we will burn even heaven to stop him. He turned to the ranks, a golden phalanx gleaming in the dim light of eternity. "Form the choir. Prepare for sanction." It was not music that answered. It was weaponry.
The choir of ashes, an order of custodies rarely summoned, marched into the sanctum's outer halls. They carried relic spear and blade, each weapon a psalm forged in the heat of devotion. Their armor bore inscriptions of fallen saints, and their voices, when raised together, resonated through the palace like the heartbeat of judgment. And in the center of their path, alone and unhurried, walked Saitama. He had left the throne behind, strolling through corridors older than history. Mosaics depicted the emperor's triumphs, every image gilded and drenched in blood. Cherub servitors floated above him, their eyes dimming as he passed, their hymns faltering mid-word. He didn't notice. He was lost in thought. Man, that guy on the throne, he's really got it rough. His voice echoed through the endless marble, the first human voice unafraid to sound bored in the heart of the Imperium. Ahead, the choir appeared, dozens of custodies, arrayed like the sons of a dying galaxy. They moved as one, the air vibrating with sanctified energy. One of them raised his spear, its edge burning with psionic fire. "By his name, stand down! You are judged unclean!" Saitama frowned slightly. "Again with that? Your words are heresy! Your existence a wound!" "I just talked to the guy." "Lies!" the custodian roared, slamming his spear into the marble floor. The shockwave cracked the stone. "No mortal speaks to the throne and lives." Saitama tilted his head. "Guess I'm not mortal then." The words fell like stones into a silent lake. Ripples of disbelief ran through the ranks. For a heartbeat, the ancient warriors hesitated, not because they feared him, but because they recognized something terrifying in his calm. Lysander stepped forward, voice steady but heavy. "If you are truth, then prove it. If you are false, then fall." The choir began to chant. Their voices merged into a single harmonic drone, a battle hymn older than Terra's oceans, tuned to resonate with the Emperor's will. The sound became matter, light, wrath, and then they struck. 100 golden lances converged on the lone figure. Each blow was enough to shatter tanks, to disintegrate demon princes, to sunder reality itself. The corridor imploded. Light devoured shadow. When the smoke cleared, the man was still standing. He looked around, blinking through the dust. "You guys done?" Lysander staggered backward, the reality of it sinking in. His armor, sanctified against the warp itself, was cracking. Fractures spidered through his blade. Saitama took one step forward. The floor beneath him caved in. The sound was not thunder. It was the quiet, terrible groan of a world realizing its insignificance. In that moment, every custodian felt it, not the power of destruction, but the weight of futility. Their faith, their training, their devotion, all the endless centuries of war and sacrifice amounted to nothing against a man who did not even wish to fight. Saitama looked at them, his voice soft. "You don't have to do this, but duty is a harder chain than steel." Lysander roared and charged. His spear, burning with the last of his will, found its mark, a direct thrust toward the stranger's chest. The world froze. Then Saitama raised one finger. The spear shattered like glass. The force blew Lysander backward, his armor splintering into 1,000 shards that glimmered like dying stars. The choir fell silent. Their song ended not with defiance, but with awe. Saitama sighed, rubbing his neck. "Seriously, you people really need hobbies." He walked past them,
Not triumphant, not cruel, just done. Behind him, the custodes knelt, not in worship nor defeat, in confusion. They looked at the stranger as if seeing something they had forgotten, a simplicity purer than divinity. Lysander, bloodied and broken, whispered through his vox grill, voice trembling, "What are you?" Saitama stopped, looked back over his shoulder. "Just a guy who likes helping people," he said. Then he was gone, swallowed by the misted halls of the palace. The choir remained in silence. The echo of his steps lingered long after he vanished, like a memory refusing to fade. And as the light dimmed, Lysander bowed his head, whispering a prayer he no longer believed. "Emperor, forgive us, for I think we have seen the face of peace." Above them, the Astronomicon pulsed, not with command, but with quiet, uncertain warmth. A light flickering not for war, but for wonder. The world outside the palace had begun to break. From the hives of Necromunda to the temples of Mars, the Astronomicon faltered, not in failure, but in hesitation. The beacon that had guided humanity through the void for 10,000 years now pulsed like a dying star, unsure of its own purpose. The High Lords of Terra convened in panic. In the marble chambers of the Senatorium Imperialis, they argued beneath banners older than their bloodlines. To them, power was not faith, it was oxygen, and something was choking it.
"He has spoken to the throne," the Fabricator General rasped, his voice filtered through layers of sacred static. "Unauthorized, unregistered, unquantified. We cannot allow this anomaly to exist." The ecclesiarch slammed his fist upon the table, rings of gold clattering. "Blasphemy! No mortal may gaze upon the divine and live. If he yet breathes, it is proof that the warp itself conspires." But the Inquisitor Lord at the far end of the hall said nothing. His single eye, red, mechanical, and weary, watched the flickering holobith before him. The image was simple: a bald man in a plain cape walking the corridors of the imperial palace. No weapons, no armor, just a face so calm that even the machine spirits refused to recognize it. "He is not a demon," the Inquisitor murmured. "The warp recoils from him." "Then what is he?" The Inquisitor looked at the others, voice low, almost reverent. "Something worse. Something we do not understand." Outside, the storm of faith intensified. Millions gathered at the gates of the palace, chanting in desperation, their voices blending into a sea of sound that shook the spires. They did not know whether to beg forgiveness or demand salvation. Inside, deep within the sanctum, the emperor sat unmoving, but not untouched. For the first time in centuries, the air around the golden throne trembled with something alive. Not the hum of machines or the static of prayers, but a quiet rhythm, like breath. He was remembering. Not the wars, not the triumphs, but the time before all of it, before the crowns, before the legions, before the heresy. A time when humanity had looked at the stars with wonder, not fear. A time when he had believed that reason, not worship, could lead them to peace. Now that vision was a corpse, embalmed in gold and fire. And yet through the cracks of that tomb, the stranger's words lingered. Maybe it's not supposed to be complicated. They echoed through the emperor's mind like prayer reversed, not rising toward heaven, but falling gently back to earth. In that stillness, the custodes returned to the throne. Their armor was dimmed, their steps hesitant. They did not kneel, not out of pride, but confusion.
"My lord," Lysander spoke, his voice hollow through his damaged vox. "The intruder moves freely. We have failed to contain him." There was no answer,
only the faint hiss of the life-sustaining machinery. And yet, Lysander felt something, a presence, vast and intimate, pressing gently against his thoughts. Not anger, not disappointment, but weariness. "Leave him." The voice came like wind through the bones of a cathedral. "My lord, leave him be." Lysander bowed deeply, "As you command." But inside, doubt bloomed like a wound. He had seen gods fall before, but never like this, never with serenity. Meanwhile, Saitama wandered through the lower halls, where light could not reach. The air here was heavy with incense and oil, the scent of devotion so thick it tasted like iron. Servitors lined the passageways, their eyes dark, their mouths whispering fragments of scripture on endless loop. He passed a shrine built from skulls and golden filigree. The plaque beneath read, "Here rests the bones of the martyr of 10,000 sins." Saitama paused, looking at it. "Yikes," he said quietly. "You guys really overdo it." His voice stirred echoes. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a sister of silence, clad in black and silver, her face half hidden by a veil. Her eyes, sharp and weary, regarded him without expression. She said nothing, of course. She could not. Her gift was silence. But the silence between them was louder than speech. Saitama smiled faintly. "You one of the good guys?" She raised her blade in answer. The motion was elegant, not hateful, but resolute. To her, he was an anomaly to be erased, a threat to the fragile balance between faith and madness. The blade flashed. Saitama caught it between two fingers. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but revelation. For she could feel it now, the impossible absence of the warp around him, the quiet void where souls should be. Her weapon trembled. For the first time in her long, silent service, she felt sound within her mind, not words, but an idea. "What are you?" Saitama lowered the blade gently. "Just passing through." He stepped aside. For a moment she hesitated, torn between duty and awe. Then she let him pass. When he was gone, she knelt trembling, unable to explain the tears that burned behind her eyes. Because for a heartbeat, just one, she had felt peace. Far above, the Emperor's voice whispered through the warp, not to his followers, but to himself. "If peace can walk, then what need have I for worship?" The thought burned brighter than any star, and for the briefest instant, the Astronomicon flared, flooding the galaxy with golden light. Every psyker felt it, every demon screamed, every mortal soul looked up, believing salvation had come. And then, as suddenly as it rose, it faded, leaving only silence, vast and holy. A silence that even gods feared to break. On the outer edges of Terra, storms of ash rose like prayers unspoken. Billions of souls kept chanting the Emperor's name, yet beneath that thunder of devotion, doubt began to breathe. The silence of their god was growing too heavy to bear. And rumors of a man who had walked into the throne and left alive, spread faster than the fires of any heresy. In the underhives, zealots proclaimed him an angel. On the decks of orbital manufactoria, workers whispered that the Emperor had finally sent his son to save them. And on the battlefields of Cadia's broken twin, soldiers swore they saw a figure move through the smoke, untouched by shellfire, haloed by the light of something they could not name. Faith was fracturing, not from blasphemy, but from hope. And in the heart of the palace, that same hope trembled like a fragile candle in the wind. The Emperor's chamber had grown quieter. The mechanical chorus of the throne ran smoother than it had in centuries. Tech priests recorded anomalies, reduced warp interference, lower psychic instability, a hum like serenity within the storm. They called it a stabilization event. They did not realize they were witnessing a god beginning to remember humanity. Saitama, unaware of any of it, reached the outer sanctum of the throne. Beyond lay the Hall of Remembrance, a cathedral whose ceiling was painted with the wars of mankind. He stopped beneath a mural depicting the siege of Terra. The image showed Horus dying, the emperor triumphant. He studied it for a long time. The brushstrokes of agony, the faces twisted with both love and rage. It was art that bled. He said quietly, "You killed your own friend, huh?" No one answered. The hall was empty except for echoes. But somewhere beyond, in the warp-lit vastness of the throne, the emperor heard. His mind, spread across the tides of unreality, flickered with the memory of that battle. The last time he had held a son in his arms, the last time he had felt the weight of choice. He would have undone all that I built.
The thought resonated, but not with pride, with regret. Saitama's voice carried softly, as if speaking to no one. Maybe he just didn't want to live the same story anymore. The throne's light dimmed, as if the words pierced even the golden circuits of godhood. Outside, thunder rolled across Terra's atmosphere. Vox networks glitched with ghostly whispers. The choirs of the Adeptus Asker Telepathica collapsed into trance, repeating one phrase over and over: "He speaks, but not to us." The custodes gathered again outside the sanctum doors, but none dared enter. Lysander stood motionless at their head. His armor was repaired, but dulled. The once lustrous gold turned to quiet bronze. He felt it, a change in the air, subtle, yet absolute. The throne's radiance no longer burned with the same fierce divinity. It pulsed like something alive. Lysander's hand tightened around his spear. "He communes with it still," he murmured. "But who commands whom now?" Within, Saitama knelt, not out of reverence, simply exhaustion. He had walked farther than he realized. The stillness of the palace pressed against him like eternity itself. He spoke again, eyes lowered. "You've been up there for so long, it's like you forgot what it's like to be small." The air vibrated. Then, a voice, no longer vast, no longer divine. "Small. Yes, I remember. I was small once." The sound was quieter now, almost human. "When I walked among them, when I loved them, when I believed they could be more." A pause. "And they made me God." Saitama lifted his gaze. "Guess that's what people do when they're scared." "And you, are you not afraid?" He smiled faintly. "I used to be. Now, I just get bored." There was a long silence, and in that silence, something impossible happened. The Emperor's presence, the blinding psychic inferno that had burned for millennia, dimmed to a flicker, then condensed into a form. Not physical, not visible, but perceptible. A figure of light stepped down from the throne, and for a breathless moment, the Emperor's consciousness stood beside Saitama as it once did among men. He looked upon the hero's face and saw what he had long abandoned, the peace that comes not from faith, but from freedom. "I envy you." Saitama frowned. "That's weird. You're supposed to be the strongest guy here." "Strength is nothing without meaning." "Yeah," Saitama said softly. "Tell me about it." The light flared, then dimmed again. The form dissolved, retreating into the throne, into machinery, into endless golden chains of prayer. But the thought remained, like a whisper carved into the bones of reality. Perhaps it is not too late.
And for the first time in 10,000 years, the emperor moved. Not a gesture, not a breath, but a single finger twitched upon the armrest of the throne. Servo skulls recorded it. Vox networks screamed. Across Terra the bells rang again, not in mourning this time, but in terror. Because if the emperor moved, then the faith that defined mankind was no longer stable. If he could change, everything could.
Saitama rose slowly, watching the trembling light around the throne. He didn't understand all of it. He didn't need to. But he could feel something heavy lifting, something ancient beginning to breathe again. Guess you just needed someone to talk to. He turned toward the doors. Behind him, the throne's light flickered, not gold this time, but pale and warm, almost human. Outside, the custodes knelt once more, weapons lowered, faces tilted toward the light. They felt it too, the faint hum of serenity amid the ruin. And though none dared to speak it, all of them knew. Something holy had shifted. Something divine had remembered how to be kind. The morning over Terra came without sunlight. The smog, the ash, the endless clouds of faith, they still cloaked the sky like mourning veils. Yet beneath that veil, something had changed. The air itself felt less heavy, as though the world had taken its first breath in 10,000 years. The emperor's finger had moved, and the galaxy could no longer remain still. The word spread faster than warp light. Across the Imperium, fleets halted mid-battle, their admirals falling to their knees. On shrine worlds, the Adepta Sorotis wept openly, believing the prophecy fulfilled, that their god would rise again. On the Forge worlds, the Mechanicus fell into chaos. Machine spirit screamed blasphemy as sensors recorded an impossible truth. The energy signature of the Golden Throne had shifted from containment to output. And yet, in the heart of it all, Saitama sat quietly on the palace steps, eating something he'd found in a forgotten vending machine. "Still tastes stale," he muttered. Above him, banners fluttered in the ash wind, the imperial aquila torn, the sigils of devotion cracked. He didn't look up at them. The air was full of noise, prayers, panic, the drone of distant engines. But Saitama's mind was still. For once, he wasn't bored.
Inside the palace, the emperor's mind moved through the warp like dawn breaking over a dead sea. For millennia, he had been chained to the machinery that fed upon his body, trapped in an unending moment of consciousness, awake but powerless. But now, that stillness cracked. The presence of the bald stranger had cut through the fog of faith like a blade through mist. He could think again, truly think. And in that clarity, he saw the truth that had eluded him for an age. The Imperium was no longer his creation. It was his prison, a vast cathedral built not to praise, but to bury. He looked down, across the currents of time, across the ocean of thought, and saw Saitama sitting there, quietly, as if the apocalypse itself was just another afternoon. "You are still here," the voice echoed in his mind, calm but vast. Saitama didn't look up. Yeah, kinda lost track of the exit. "You came without purpose, and yet you changed everything." He sighed. Wasn't really trying to. Just happens, I guess. The emperor's light pulsed faintly within the palace. The custodes who stood guard felt it wash over them, not command, not divine decree, but something strange and gentle, understanding. "Tell me, hero, what do you seek?" Saitama tilted his head, thinking. "Nothing, really." "Nothing?" "Yeah. I already found out that power doesn't make you happy. Doesn't make you human, either. There was silence, then a low hum, as though the machines themselves were listening.
Then what does? He smiled faintly. Dunno. Maybe just being around people who aren't afraid. That answer lingered in the warp like a spark refusing to die. The Emperor's voice grew softer, touched with something rare, sorrow. I fear I have forgotten how to be among them. Then maybe it's time to remember. The words were simple, but they cracked eternity. The warp shuddered. Daemons screamed. The Astronomonican flared with living light. Across the galaxy, psychers fell to their knees as a wave of impossible energy rippled through the void, not destructive, but cleansing. And far from Terra, where Imperial fleets fought orc warbands near the Maelstrom, a miracle occurred. The warp storms parted. For a brief hour, ships passed unscathed through regions that had devoured entire crusades. The void, once thick with hatred, went still, as if holding its breath. The Imperium's scribes recorded it in panic as the calm of the unknown hour. They could not know that the calm came from two men, one god, one man, standing in quiet conversation amid the ruins of faith. Back on Terra, the Custodes approached carefully. Lysander led them, his face set with both awe and dread. He stopped several paces from Saitama. You have done something to him. Saitama looked up from his snack. What, the old guy? Nah, just talked. The custodian's tone hardened. Do you realize what that means? His will shapes the galaxy. His silence binds the stars. If he wakes fully, then maybe things will finally change, Saitama interrupted.
Saitama stood, brushing off his cape. Sometimes you gotta break the old stuff before you can fix it. Behind them, the ground shook. The golden gates of the throne room began to open again, not by force, but by will. The light that spilled through was not the burning gold of godhood, but the warm radiance of dawn. The Custodes fell to their knees as the Emperor's voice filled the palace, not through speakers or psychic projection, but directly, intimately, like breath against the soul. My children, stand. The words rolled through every heart like thunder, clothed in kindness. They obeyed, trembling. You have served well. You have guarded my dream, but my dream has changed. Lysander's eyes widened. My lord, what do you mean? The light grew brighter, not painful, but cleansing. For 10,000 years I was their god. Now I would be their father. The chamber shook. Servitors malfunctioned, unable to process the concept of mercy. The Mechanicus screamed blasphemy through their Vox networks. The Ecclesiarchy fainted where they stood. And Saitama, standing in the middle of it all, smiled slightly. Guess you figured it out. The Emperor's radiance pulsed once more. Thank you, hero. Saitama rubbed his neck awkwardly. Don't mention it. Above them, the Astronomician flared to its brightest in history. For one glorious moment, every world of the Imperium basked in the light of something pure, something not divine, but human. And in that moment, hope felt real again. But even light cast shadows. Deep within the warp, something ancient stirred. 1,000 daemon princes screamed as the balance shifted. A golden flame was awakening, and the dark hated it. Reality itself began to twist in preparation. And though the Emperor could not yet rise, he felt it, the gathering storm. He turned his gaze toward Saitama.
If I am to live again, the warp will answer. They will come. Saitama rolled his shoulders. Then I'll handle it. They are legion. Doesn't matter. The Emperor's presence pulsed once, a quiet laugh hidden in the hum of godhood. Then let us see if hope can bleed them as well. Outside, thunder cracked. The sky of Terra split open, not with rain, but with warp light. 1,000 rifts blooming like dark flowers across the horizon. And Saitama stepped forward, the first human in 10,000 years to face hell, not with prayer, but with calm. The sky above Terra tore open like a wound. Where once hung only the gray rot of pollution and devotion, there now burned the colors of the warp, hues that no sane eye should see, bleeding into the atmosphere like oil into holy water. The clouds screamed as reality folded, and the light of the Astronomicon pulsed violently, struggling to contain what was coming. And yet, on the ground, the man who had woken a god stood with his hands in his pockets. Saitama squinted at the sky. Ah, that's not good.
From the rifts poured legions of shadow and fury, the hosts of the Immaterium. They did not descend like invaders, but like memories, writhing into shape, winged forms of brass and bone, beasts whose bodies were made from despair and fire. Names older than language echoed across the wind. The custodes braced themselves, forming a golden phalanx around the palace. Their formation was perfect, their faith absolute, but even they knew, in some buried human corner of their souls, that they were not enough. Lysander's voice carried through the voxnet. "Defend the throne! For Terra! For—" His words died as the first daemon landed. It struck the marble with the sound like thunder made flesh, a creature of shifting forms, half angel, half nightmare. The ground burned where it touched. Its many mouths spoke as one. "We feel him, we sense him, and so we come." And the war began. The custodes charged. Spears of Oramite split daemons in half, burning them into cinders of hate. The sky turned crimson with the light of dying souls. Voxnets flooded with the sounds of prayer and agony. Saitama stood still, watching. Man, they never take a day off. Then he moved. To the mortal eye, it was instantaneous. One moment he was still. The next, the air exploded outward, pressure waves flattening rubble and sending daemons screaming into vapor. Each punch landed without effort, yet every blow carried the weight of a sun. He tore through the horde as if through mist, not in rage, not even in excitement, but in quiet necessity. For every creature that fell, another rose, spilling from the rifts like infection. And through it all, his face remained calm, almost bored. The Emperor watched through the warp, not as a distant deity, but as a man rediscovering wonder. For 10,000 years he had seen only devotion born of fear. Now he watched courage born of choice. "You stand against eternity." The voice echoed in Saitama's mind, not commanding, but acknowledging.
"Yeah," he said, dodging a spear of crimson fire and countering with a flick that shattered a daemon into mist. "I've had worse mornings." Above them, the rifts widened, not in defiance, but desperation. The warp itself seemed to recoil from the one thing it could not touch: simplicity. For the Immaterium thrived on emotion, fear, rage, lust, despair. But this man carried none. He was empty, still, untouchable. To strike him was to strike a void. And so they began to fade. From the highest spire, Lysander watched in disbelief. Where entire crusades had been devoured by a single daemon incursion, one man now erased legions with movements too casual to comprehend. He whispered through the vox, voice trembling. "Is this
Salvation? No one answered. The golden warriors stood frozen, watching the impossible unfold. And then, from the heart of the largest rift, a new presence came. It was not shaped like the others. It was not flame or shadow, but form. Terrible, regal, ancient. A daemon prince of impossible stature, crowned with horns that scraped the clouds, eyes burning with the memory of fallen gods. It spoke in a voice that shook the bones of Terra. You would awaken him? You would free the one who bound us? Fool of flesh, we are his consequence. Saitama looked up, unimpressed. You talk too much. The creature's laughter split the air, warping it into waves of heat. You are nothing mortal. We were born from his will, from his hatred, his pride, his despair. You cannot kill what he created. Guess we'll find out. The world blinked. There was no explosion, no light, just a single punch. And the Daemon Prince was gone. Not slain, not banished, erased.
The warp screamed, the sky rippled, and for a moment every demon across Terra froze as though the concept of power itself had faltered. Saitama lowered his hand, exhaling softly. Yeah, thought so. The air cleared, the rifts flickered, collapsing into themselves. The smell of ozone and ash filled the silence that followed. And then only the wind remained. The custodes slowly lowered their weapons. Lysander took a step forward. His armor cracked, his voice almost reverent. He's gone. The warp, it's retreating. Saitama rubbed his shoulder. Good. That means I can finally take a nap. From within the palace, the Emperor's light dimmed to a warm glow. The warp quieted like a storm spent of fury. For the first time in history, the psychic tides lay still. You have done what I could not, the Emperor's voice said, not in thunder, but in peace. You have silenced the immaterium. Saitama shrugged. Didn't mean to, just hit the loud one. And yet you remade the world. He looked up toward the palace, the dim light reflecting in his calm eyes. Nah, you did. You just needed a reminder. The golden gates opened once more, and through them the Emperor's presence spilled across Terra, no longer divine, no longer burning, gentle, human. Every pilgrim on the planet felt it. Every heart bowed, not in submission, but in awe. For the first time since the dawn of the Imperium, their God's light did not command obedience. It offered grace. The Emperor spoke again, his voice carrying across the stars into every ship, every hive, every forgotten world. My children, it is enough. Rise. Live. And as his words reached the farthest edges of the galaxy, the silence that followed was not empty. It was holy. Saitama closed his eyes, feeling the calm settle over everything. Guess that's my job done. He turned away from the palace, the wind tugging gently at his cape. The custodes parted as he passed, bowing without knowing why. Somewhere behind him, the Emperor's light shimmered like sunrise. Where will you go, hero? Saitama smiled faintly. Wherever someone needs help, I guess. And he walked into the dust, small against the horizon, leaving behind the cradle of humanity reborn. The Emperor watched him go, and for the first time in 10,000 years, whispered a prayer. May man walk without God, and still be good. And from the quiet heart of the throne, something impossible stirred. Not power, not divinity, but hope. The silence that followed was sacred. For the first time in remembered history, Terra, that ancient wounded world, was quiet. No hymns, no orders, no cries of worship.
only the faint hum of a world unsure whether to rejoice or fear. The emperor's light had changed. It no longer scorched the eyes or demanded obedience. It was soft now, like dawn seen through tears. And in that gentle glow, something older than faith began to stir. The simple, forgotten pulse of humanity. Across the galaxy, miracles unfolded, not as spectacles, but as mercies. On Armageddon, where ash storms had blotted out the sun for centuries, the skies cleared for a single hour. The soldiers stood in stunned silence as sunlight touched the ground. On Baal, the dying remnants of the blood angels awoke to a peace they could not explain, their thirst quieted, their rage hushed. At Cadia's ruins, flowers grew through cracks of stone blackened by the eye of terror. For a moment, the galaxy remembered what life was before gods. And at the heart of it all, the emperor sat upon his throne, not as a corpse, not as a god, but as a man. The cable still pierced his flesh, the machinery still whispered, but his eyes were open. They were not golden flames anymore. They were weary, human, kind.
He looked across the endless chamber and spoke softly, his voice carried not by the warp, but by will alone. "Where is he?" Lysander, kneeling before the throne, lifted his head. "Gone, my lord. He walked into the wastes beyond the palace. None could stop him." The emperor nodded slowly. "Do not seek him." "My lord?" "He is not to be worshipped. He is to be remembered." Lysander bowed his head. "As you command." The emperor closed his eyes again, but he did not return to stillness. He was not dreaming, he was listening to the hum of the machines, to the breath of the world, to the faint laughter of a man somewhere beyond the walls carried by the wind. It had been 10,000 years since he had heard laughter without fear. And for the first time, he smiled. Far from the palace, Saitama walked the shattered plains beyond the city walls. The wind carried the scent of iron and incense. Ruins stretched across the horizon, skeletal remains of temples built in blind devotion. He stepped over them gently. The stars were faint above, dimmed by the weight of centuries, yet one by one, they seemed to brighten again. Tiny, uncertain lights, finding courage again. He stopped by a broken statue. The emperor, cast in marble, one arm raised in eternal command. The head was missing. The eyes had been gouged out by time. Saitama looked at it for a long while. "You look better this way," he said softly. He sat down at its feet, resting his chin on his hands. For the first time since he could remember, the silence didn't bother him. It was peaceful. He thought of the people he'd met here. The girl with soot on her cheeks, the priest who had burned for his faith, the silent warrior who had looked at him without fear. They were strange, all of them, fragile, haunted, beautiful. "Guess they're not that different," he murmured. He watched the horizon, where the glow of the palace flickered faintly, not as the beacon of empire, but as a campfire in the dark, small, living. A faint voice stirred in the back of his mind like an echo from somewhere beyond time. "Thank you." He didn't answer. He just smiled. "You're welcome." Then, for no reason he could name, he laughed. Quiet, genuine, almost shy. It rolled across the empty plains, light as the wind, and the sound carried through the ruins, through the cracks of temples, through the broken halls of faith. And in the depths of the throne, the emperor heard it. He leaned back, eyes half closed, and whispered to himself, "May this sound never fade." Days passed, then weeks, then months.
The Imperium began to change, not by decree, but by erosion. The ecclesiarchy found itself preaching silence instead of fire. The Adeptus Mechanicus, shaken by the stilling of the warp, began to study rather than worship. Even the Custodes, those golden sons of obedience, learned to stand without orders. No one could say when the worship ended. It simply dissolved. In its place came something simpler, quieter. Men built homes instead of temples. They planted crops where idols once stood. They prayed less and spoke more. And on the wind, from time to time, a story was told of a man with no name who came from nowhere, who spoke to their God and reminded him how to be human.
They called him many things: the bald saint, the quiet one, the hand of mercy, but most said he never liked titles. They said he walked until even the stars could not follow. 1,000 years later, when the historians of a gentler age wrote of this time, they found no record of battles or decrees, only a single inscription carved into the base of a broken statue on Terra's plain. It read, "Even gods may grow tired, and that's okay." Above, in the deep quiet of the cosmos, the Astronomicon still shone, no longer a cage of faith, but a beacon of remembrance. Its light no longer burned the minds of psychers. It guided travelers gently, like a father's hand on a child's shoulder. And if one listened closely to the hum of the universe, they could almost hear it, faint, eternal, the echo of two voices across time, one divine, one human. Guess it's not supposed to be complicated. No, it never was. The light flickered once, not in warning, but in peace. And so ended the age of gods. The age of man began again.